My name is Archer, 58 years old, a retired construction foreman with calloused hands and a lifetime of building things that last. I never thought my own son would strike me not once, let alone 15 times across my face while his wife watched in horror. My cheeks stung with each blow, but my heart shattered completely. I said nothing that day, simply walked away. But when he left for work the next morning, I made a single phone call that changed everything. Before I tell you how I reclaimed my dignity and taught my son the hardest lesson of his life, let me know where you are watching from and hit that subscribe button if you have ever had to stand up to someone who thought they could walk all over you without consequences. I have always believed that family is sacred. Growing up in a blue-collar household in Michigan, I watched my father work himself to exhaustion in the automotive factories, coming home with grease permanently embedded in the creases of his hands. My mother stretched every dollar until it screamed, making meals appear out of seemingly nothing when times were tight. They taught me that family supports each other, protects each other, sacrifices for each other. Those lessons stayed with me when I married my high school sweetheart, Elaine, at 20. We were young and hopeful, with nothing but dreams and determination. I followed in my father's footsteps, not into the factories, but into construction. Starting as a laborer, I worked my way up to foreman over 15 years of backbreaking effort. Elaine took night classes while working days as a receptionist, eventually becoming an elementary school teacher. Our son Maxwell came along when we were 25 strong. From the moment I first held him, I promised myself he would have opportunities I never had. Every splinter in my hands, every ache in my back was worth it when I came home to his toothy grin and excited stories. "Dad, watch this," he would shout, performing some new trick or showing off something he had built with his toy blocks. Even then, Max showed an interest in building things, following me around with his plastic tool set, fixing whatever I worked on around the house. When our daughter Sophia arrived 3 years later, our family felt complete. The kids were the center of our universe, and Elaine and I worked in perfect tandem to provide them with a stable, loving home. We were not wealthy by any means, but we made sure they never went without. Christmas mornings were magical summer vacations, were simple camping trips that created lifelong memories, and dinner was always at the family table. Education was non-negotiable in our household. "Your job is to learn," Elaine would tell the children. "Our job is everything else." We took that seriously, often working extra shifts or postponing our own needs to ensure there was money for school supplies, extracurricular activities, and eventually college funds. Maxwell showed exceptional intelligence from an early age. By high school, he was taking advanced placement courses and talking about becoming an architect or engineer. "I want to build things that matter, Dad," he told me during his junior year. "Not just buildings, but spaces that change how people live and work." My chest nearly burst with pride hearing those words. This was exactly what we had sacrificed for a child who could dream beyond the limitations of our own lives. When acceptance letters began arriving from prestigious universities, including Cornell's architecture program, I knew the years of sacrifice had been worthwhile. The financial reality, however, was daunting. Even with scholarships, Cornell would cost more than we had managed to save. Without hesitation, Elaine and I refinanced our modest home, took second jobs, and committed to making it happen. "We can eat beans for 4 years," Elaine joked, though we both knew it was only partly in jest. Our lifestyle would become even more frugal, but neither of us questioned the decision. This was for Maxwell, our brilliant son, who would go on to design buildings that touched the sky. Sophia followed a different path, more interested in people than structures. She chose a state university and a degree in social work, practical and compassionate like her mother. Her education stretched our resources further, but we managed through careful planning and continued sacrifice. During those college years, I began noticing subtle changes in Maxwell. His calls home became less frequent, his visits shorter. When he did come home, his conversations were peppered with references to his new friends, many from wealthy families, with connections we could never provide. He began making small but cutting comments about our home, our furniture, even the food Elaine prepared so lovingly. "Dad, do you really need to wear those work boots everywhere?" he asked during one holiday visit. "They make you look like, well, a construction worker." I laughed it off. "I am a construction worker's son, 30 years now." He frowned slightly. "But you are a foreman. You could dress more like management." These moments stung, but I brushed them aside as growing pains, the natural distance that comes when children expand their horizons beyond their upbringing. Elaine worried more than I did, noticing how he would check his phone during family conversations or step outside to take calls from his new friends rather than fully engaging with us. "He is just finding his way," I reassured her. "Remember how we were at that age trying to figure out who we wanted to be? We never made our parents feel small." She responded quietly, but did not press the issue. When Maxwell graduated with honors from Cornell, Elaine and I sat proudly in the audience, squinting to spot him among the sea of caps and gowns. We had scrimped and saved for years to buy him a proper graduation gift, a professional-grade drafting tabletop of the line. It had cost nearly $5,000 money that could have gone to much-needed home repairs or the vacation Elaine had been quietly hoping for after years without one. After the ceremony, we presented him with an envelope containing a certificate for the drafting table already delivered and set up in his new apartment in Boston, where he had secured a position at a prestigious architectural firm. "Thanks," he said, glancing briefly at the certificate before tucking it into his pocket. "Some of the guys are going for drinks to celebrate. You do not mind if I skip dinner, right? We can catch up tomorrow before you head back." Elaine's face fell, but she quickly recovered with a forced smile. "Of course, honey. Go celebrate with your friends. You earned it." That night back at our budget hotel room, Elaine cried quietly while I held her. "He is changing, Archer, becoming someone I do not recognize." "He is just excited about his future," I said, though doubt had begun to creep in. "Once he settles into his career, he will remember where he came from, who helped him get there." I wanted to believe that more than anything. That our son was still the boy who had followed me around with plastic tools, who had looked at me with admiration as I taught him to hammer a nail or level a shelf. But a voice in the back of my mind whispered that something fundamental had shifted, that the distance growing between us was not just geographic, but something deeper and more concerning. Over the next 5 years, that distance continued to grow. Maxwell's career flourished at the architectural firm. He was assigned to increasingly prestigious projects, his name beginning to gain recognition in industry publications. When he called, which was rare, his conversations revolved around networking events, important clients, and the luxurious apartment he had moved into in a trendy Boston neighborhood. During this time, Elaine was diagnosed with breast cancer. The diagnosis came shortly after Sophia's wedding to a kind social worker named David. We decided not to tell the children immediately, not wanting to cast a shadow over Sophia's happiness or distract Maxwell from an important project he had mentioned. When we finally shared the news, Sophia immediately offered to move back home temporarily to help with Elaine's care. Maxwell sent flowers and called more regularly, but always with the excuse that work made it impossible to visit. "The Anderson project is at a critical phase," he would explain. "The client is demanding changes that require my personal attention." Elaine never complained. "He has worked so hard to get where he is," she would say. "We cannot expect him to put his career on hold." But as her condition worsened and treatments failed, I finally put my foot down and called Maxwell directly. "Your mother may not have much time left," I said bluntly. Whatever project you are working on can wait. She needs to see you. He arrived the next day, clearly uncomfortable in the medical environment of the hospice where Elaine had been moved. He stayed for 2 days, spending more time on his laptop in the waiting room than at Elaine's bedside. When he did sit with her, he talked mostly about his recent promotion and the luxury condo he was considering purchasing. Elaine passed away 3 days after he returned to Boston. At the funeral, Maxwell stood stoically beside me, accepting condolences from friends and family, with practiced phrases that sounded rehearsed and empty. He left immediately after the service, citing an important client meeting the next morning. She would understand, he told me as he hugged me briefly before departing. Mom always supported my career. I was too numb with grief to argue, to point out that this was his mother's funeral, not a dentist appointment that could be rushed through. Sophia and David stayed for a week, helping me sort through Elaine's belongings and adjust to the silence of the house without her woof, her voice, her presence. In the months that followed, I threw myself into work, taking on additional responsibilities at the construction company, despite being close to retirement age. The physical exhaustion helped dull the emotional pain. Sophia called, daily visited when she could, and gently suggested grief counseling, which I eventually accepted. Maxwell's communications remained sporadic and surface level. On the rare occasions we spoke, he seemed increasingly disconnected from the family he had grown up in, as if his upbringing had been merely a stepping stone to the life he now led, something to move beyond rather than honor. Then came the day that would change everything. A call from Maxwell, unusually enthusiastic. "Dad, I have incredible news. I am getting married. Her name is Victoria. She comes from a wonderful family. Her father is the CEO of a development company that might have some projects for my firm. We are planning a June wedding at her family's estate in Connecticut." For the first time in months, I felt a spark of joy. "That is wonderful news, son. I cannot wait to meet her." "Actually," he continued, "she is with me now. We would like to come visit this weekend. There are some things we want to discuss with you." Hope bloomed in my chest. Perhaps this relationship was helping Maxwell reconnect with his roots, remember the importance of family. "I will be here," I said warmly. "Just let me know when to expect you." That weekend, Maxwell arrived driving a sleek black luxury car I had never seen before. Victoria was everything I might have expected, beautiful, polished, clearly from a privileged background. But to my surprise and delight, she was also warm, genuinely interested in the family photos I showed her, and respectful in a way that made me wonder if she might be a positive influence on my son. "Your home is so charming, Mr. Brennan," she said, as I gave them a tour of our modest house. "It has such character and history." "Please call me Archer," I insisted. "And thank you. Elaine and I put a lot of love into this place over the years." Maxwell seemed impatient with the small talk and house tour. "Dad, we actually came to discuss something specific," he said, guiding us to the living room. "Victoria and I have been looking at properties for after the wedding, and we have found the perfect place. It is in an exclusive neighborhood close to both our offices, with excellent security and amenities." "That sounds wonderful," I said, genuinely happy for them. "When do you close on it?" Maxwell cleared his throat. "Well, that is what we wanted to talk to you about. The down payment is substantial. The market in Boston is extremely competitive right now, and to secure this particular property, we need to move quickly with a strong offer." I waited, sensing where this was heading, but hoping I was wrong. "I was thinking," he continued, "about the equity you have in this house. You do not really need all this space now that Mom is gone, and honestly, the neighborhood has declined over the years. It makes financial sense for you to sell, downsize to something more manageable, and perhaps help us with our down payment in the process." There it was. Not a visit to reconnect, but a business proposition. I see, I said slowly. And where would you suggest I live if I sold my home? There are plenty of nice retirement communities, he replied immediately, as if he had rehearsed this part. Places where maintenance is handled for you, where you would have people your own age around. It would be much more suitable than rattling around in this big old house by yourself. Victoria looked increasingly uncomfortable as the conversation progressed, glancing between Maxwell and me with growing concern. Maxwell, she said softly, maybe we should discuss this another time. Your father has only recently lost your mother. This is a lot to process. There is no better time, Maxwell insisted. The housing market is hot right now. Dad could get a good price for this place, enough to help us, and still have plenty left over for a comfortable retirement arrangement. The way he spoke, as if my home of 30 years was merely a financial asset to be liquidated for his benefit, struck me like a physical blow. This house held every memory of the life Elaine and I had built together. Every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone was embedded in these walls. The backyard tree, where we had hung swings for Maxwell and Sophia. The kitchen, where Elaine had taught them both to bake. The living room where we now sat, where we had opened presents, shared stories, comforted each other through hardships. I am not interested in selling my home, I said firmly, or moving to a retirement community. I am only 58, Maxwell, hardly ready for assisted living. His expression hardened. Dad, be reasonable. This house is a financial burden on you now. The roof needs replacing, the furnace is ancient, and the property taxes keep rising. It is dragging you down when you could be living somewhere more appropriate for your situation. My situation, I repeated carefully. And what situation would that be exactly? You know what I mean, he said dismissively. You are alone now, getting older. This house requires maintenance you can barely manage anymore. And frankly, it is a waste of equity that could be put to better use. Better use meaning your down payment, I clarified. It is an investment in the future, he countered. In your grandchildren's future. Grandchildren I do not have yet, I noted. Victoria placed a restraining hand on Maxwell's arm. Max, please. This is not the approach we discussed. He shook her off, his frustration visibly mounting. Dad, I am trying to help you make a smart financial decision that benefits everyone. Why are you being so stubborn? I do not consider wanting to stay in my own home stubborn, I replied, keeping my voice level, despite the anger building inside me. This house is not just an asset, Max. It is my home, where your mother and I raised you, where we made a life together. Sentimentality is expensive, he snapped. Mom would have understood the practicality of what I am suggesting. The mention of Elaine in this context struck me like another blow. Do not presume to tell me what your mother would have wanted, I said quietly, my voice finally betraying my emotion. She poured her heart into this home, into raising you and your sister. She would never have expected me to give it up so you could live in a luxury condo. Maxwell stood abruptly, his face flushing with anger. This is exactly why you are stuck where you are, Dad. You cannot see beyond your outdated working-class mentality. Some of us want to move up in the world, not stay rooted in the past. Victoria gasped. Maxwell, apologize to your father right now. But Maxwell was beyond hearing her. Years of suppressed disdain for his upbringing, for the blue-collar values that had put him through an elite education, seemed to surface all at once. You know what, I am done trying to help you. Stay here until the place falls down around you. Just do not come asking me for help when the roof finally gives out, or when you cannot afford the heating bills anymore. I remained seated, looking at this stranger wearing my son's face. I have never asked you for anything, Maxwell. Not one thing. It has always been me and your mother giving to you, supporting you, sacrificing for you. And now when you think I might finally be useful to your ambitions again, you come with demands disguised as concern." He loomed over me, his expensive suit and carefully styled hair creating a stark contrast to my worn jeans and flannel shirt. "Useful. You think you have been useful. Your construction worker salary barely covered the basics. It was Mom's teaching income that made any of it work. And even then I had to take out student loans, work campus jobs while my roommates were enjoying college life." This was news to me. Elaine and I had carefully calculated that between our savings, the home refinance, and his scholarships, Maxwell would not need loans. Had he taken them out unnecessarily for spending money rather than necessities? I started to question him on this point, but he was already continuing his tirade. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing it was having my friends meet my blue-collar dad with his calloused hands and work boots? Having to explain why I went home to a tiny house in a declining neighborhood instead of to a beach house or ski lodge like they did?" Each word was a knife twisting in my gut. All these years, while Elaine and I had been sacrificing, proud of providing our son with opportunities, he had been ashamed of us, of me. "I never asked to be born into this," he went on, gesturing dismissively around the living room. "But I worked my way out of it. The least you could do now is help me secure the life I deserve instead of clinging to this monument to mediocrity." Victoria stood, then tears in her eyes. "I cannot listen to this anymore. Max, I am going to wait in the car. When you have come to your senses and are ready to apologize to your father, I will be there." She turned to me. "Mr. Brennan, I am so sorry. This is not the man I thought I was engaged to." She left the front door closing firmly behind her. Maxwell barely seemed to notice her departure, still standing over me, years of suppressed contempt pouring out. "You just do not get it, do you? This is my chance to finally move in the right circles, to secure the connections that will take my career to the next level. Victoria's family has influence I cannot even begin to explain to you. This house," he gestured around again, "is worth enough to make the difference between getting the property we want or losing it to someone else. Your sentimental attachment is literally holding back my future." I stood then finally at my full height, still an inch or two taller than my son, despite the slight stoop that years of construction work had given me. "Maxwell, I think you should leave now. Go cool off. Think about what you have said here today. About the way you have spoken to me in the home where I raised you, where your mother and I gave everything we had to give you a good life." Something in my calm demeanor seemed to enrage him further. Perhaps he had expected me to shout back to match his anger with my own. Instead, my quiet disappointment seemed to penetrate where anger might not have. "You think you are so righteous," he hissed. "So morally superior with your working man dignity. You are just afraid of change, afraid to admit that your son has become more successful than you ever were. That he has outgrown the limitations you tried to impose with your small-town values and modest ambitions." I shook my head sadly. "The only thing I am afraid of, son, is that somewhere along the way we failed to teach you what really matters in life. And that is my burden to bear." What happened next occurred so quickly, I barely had time to register it. Maxwell's face contorted with a rage I had never seen before, and his hand flew up and across my face in a sharp, stinging slap. The shock of it froze us both momentarily. In 30 years, I had never once raised a hand to Maxwell. Not in discipline, not in anger, never. And now here he was, a grown man of 33, striking his father across the face in the very home where he had been raised with love and sacrifice. Before either of us could speak, he slapped me again, and again, Each blow seemed to fuel his rage rather than dissipate it. I stood immobile, too shocked to defend myself, too heartbroken to comprehend what was happening. 15 times his hand connected with my face, my son hitting me with increasing force, as if trying to erase me to beat away the working-class origins he had come to despise. Only when Victoria rushed back in, alerted by the commotion, did he stop. She screamed, grabbing his arm as he prepared for another blow. "Maxwell, stop this right now. Have you lost your mind?" He froze suddenly, seeing himself as if from outside his body, horror slowly replacing rage as he realized what he had done. My cheek burned, my eye already beginning to swell, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the shattering of my heart. Without a word, I turned and walked to the front door, opening it wide. "Leave my home," I said quietly. "Both of you." "Dad, Maxwell began, but I cut him off with a raised hand. "Leave. Now." Victoria practically dragged him out the door, murmuring apologies I barely heard through the rushing sound in my ears. As their car pulled away, I closed the door and sank to the floor, my back against the wall, and for the first time since Elaine's funeral, I wept without restraint. The physical evidence of Maxwell's assault was impossible to hide. By morning, my left eye had swollen nearly shut, my cheek bore angry red marks that would soon darken to bruises, and my lip was split in the corner. Looking in the bathroom mirror, I barely recognized the damaged face staring back at me. What do you do when your own child, the person you raised with love and sacrifice, strikes you repeatedly in a fit of rage? The question echoed in my mind as I gingerly applied ice to the worst of the swelling. There were no parenting books for this situation, no support groups I knew of for fathers assaulted by their adult sons. My phone had been buzzing with notifications since dawn. 12 missed calls from Maxwell. 23 text messages, the preview showing desperate apologies and pleas to talk. 3 voicemails I could not bring myself to listen to. 1 text from Victoria simply stating, "I am so deeply sorry, Mr. Brennan. Please know I had no idea Maxwell was capable of such behavior. I am reconsidering everything." I silenced the phone and set it aside. Whatever Maxwell had to say, whatever excuses or apologies he might offer, I was not ready to hear them. The betrayal ran too deep, cut too close to the bone. This was not a momentary loss of temper or a regrettable outburst. The 15 deliberate blows escalating in force revealed a well of contempt and resentment that had clearly been building for years. As I sat at the kitchen table holding the ice pack to my face and staring at the worn surface where our family had shared thousands of meals, my thoughts turned to the documents in my home office, specifically to a folder labeled Maxwell's House Purchase that contained papers I had never mentioned to my son. With a heavy heart, I retrieved the folder and spread its contents across the table. Deed documents, mortgage papers, tax records, all relating to the house Maxwell currently lived in, the luxury condo he had purchased 2 years earlier when he received a substantial promotion at his architectural firm. What Maxwell did not know, what I had never told him, was that his down payment had come from me. Not directly, but through a private arrangement with the seller that had reduced the purchase price by $90,000, the equivalent of a 20% down payment on the property. The seller was Walter Gaines, the owner of the construction company where I had worked for over 30 years. When Maxwell had mentioned his interest in the property, which happened to be owned by Walter's recently deceased brother, I had approached my boss privately. Walter and I had a relationship that went beyond employer and employee. I had been with his company since its founding, had helped build it from a small local operation to a regional success. When he heard about Maxwell's interest in his brother's condo, Walter had offered to sell it at a reduced price as a gesture of appreciation for my decades of loyal service. "Consider it the bonus you deserve, but I could never afford to give you," Walter had said. Your boy gets a premium property at a discount. You get the satisfaction of helping him without him feeling like he took a handout, and I get to honor my brother's memory by passing his home to a promising young man. The arrangement had been structured as a private sale reduction, with Walter covering the difference personally. Maxwell never knew. He believed he had negotiated a remarkable deal through his own business acumen, securing a property in one of Boston's most desirable neighborhoods at below market value. I had been content to let him believe that, proud of his success, while quietly facilitating it from behind the scenes. But there was a crucial detail about the arrangement that Maxwell had no knowledge of. At my request, Walter had included a special clause in the sale documents, one that gave me unique leverage should it ever be needed. I had never imagined I would use it. Had included it more as a precautionary measure, a father's instinctive desire to maintain some connection to a son who seemed to be drifting further away with each passing year. Now, with my face throbbing from my son's blows, I made a decision I never thought I would have to make. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I rarely used. Walter. It is Archer Brennan. I need to ask you about that special provision in Maxwell's condo purchase. Yes, I am afraid it has become necessary to invoke it. Morning arrived with a clarity I had not experienced since before Elaine's illness. Despite my injuries, I felt strangely energized, focused in a way that had been missing for months. I showered carefully, avoiding the tender areas of my face, and dressed in what Elaine had always called my serious business outfit: dark slacks, a crisp blue button-down shirt, and a navy blazer I reserved for important meetings. At precisely 8:30 a.m., my doorbell rang. Walter Gaines stood on my porch, his usually jovial face somber as he took in the visible evidence of Maxwell's assault. "Jesus, Archer," he muttered. "When you said he hit you, I did not realize. This is assault, plain and simple. You should press charges." I shook my head. "No police. This stays between us." Walter nodded reluctantly. "If you are sure. I have everything prepared as we discussed." He handed me a leather portfolio containing several documents. "The reversion of ownership is complete. The special clause has been activated. As of 9 a.m. This morning, the property legally returns to my ownership with all of Maxwell's equity forfeit, as stipulated in the original agreement." The special provision we had included in Maxwell's purchase agreement was unusual but legally binding. It stated that in the event of certain specific behaviors, including physical violence against family members, the property would revert to the original owner with all equity forfeit. Maxwell had signed this provision without reading the fine print, too eager to secure the below-market price to bother with what he likely assumed was standard legal jargon. "What about his possessions?" I asked, reviewing the documents. "The moving company is scheduled to arrive at 10 a.m. as you requested. They will pack everything and place it in storage. The locks will be changed by noon. The notification of ownership change has already been filed with the building management and the relevant authorities." Walter hesitated. "Are you absolutely certain about this, Archer? It is within my rights to simply issue a warning instead of full enforcement." I thought about the 15 deliberate blows, about the contempt in Maxwell's voice as he demanded I sell my home to fund his lifestyle, about the years of growing disrespect and disdain for the values that had shaped his upbringing. "I am certain. He needs to understand there are consequences." Walter nodded, his expression a mixture of sadness and resignation. "I will handle the rest of the details. You should prepare yourself for the fallout. This will not be pretty." After Walter left, I turned my phone back on, bracing for the inevitable. Sure enough, there were more messages from Maxwell, increasingly impatient and less apologetic with each one. The most recent, sent just 30 minutes earlier, read, "Dad, this silent treatment is childish. We need to move forward. Victoria and I still need to discuss the house situation with you. Her parents are asking questions about our plans. He had already moved past the assault in his mind, returning to his original purpose as if striking me repeatedly had been merely an unfortunate detour rather than a complete breakdown of our relationship. This confirmed I was making the right decision, difficult as it was. I did not respond to his messages. Instead, I placed a call to Victoria directly. She answered immediately, her voice tentative. "Mr. Brennan, I am so sorry about what happened. How are you?" "I have been better," I replied honestly. "Victoria, I am calling because some things are going to happen today that will affect you, and I wanted you to hear it from me first." "What things?" Her voice sharpened with concern. "Maxwell's condo is being repossessed today. He will no longer have ownership or residence rights as of noon. His belongings are being placed in storage." There was a moment of stunned silence before she spoke. "I do not understand." "Maxwell owns that condo outright. He made the final mortgage payment 3 months ago. He showed me the documents." "The documents were not what they appeared to be," I explained carefully. "The truth is, I arranged a substantial price reduction on that property through my employer, who was related to the previous owner. Part of that arrangement included a special provision that Maxwell apparently never read carefully. In the event of certain behaviors, including violence against family members, ownership would revert to the original seller." Another long silence. Then, very quietly, "Because he hit you." "Yes, 15 times to be exact." "Oh God." Her voice broke. "I had no idea this could happen. We are supposed to be getting married in 4 months. We have plans, deposits. I understand this impacts you as well, and I am truly sorry for that," I said sincerely. "You seem like a good person, Victoria. But I need to ask you something important. Has Maxwell ever shown this type of violence before? Has he ever struck you or threatened you in any way?" "No," she replied immediately. "Never. I would not have stayed with him if he had. But yesterday, the way he just kept hitting you, it was like watching a stranger, a frightening, out-of-control stranger. That is why I am taking this action. Not just as punishment, but as a wake-up call. He needs to understand that actions have consequences, especially actions that hurt the people who love him." "Where is he supposed to live?" she asked, practical concerns emerging through the shock. "The storage facility will have that information for him. I imagine he will need to find a hotel temporarily while he sorts things out." "Mr. Brennan." Victoria hesitated. "I do not know what to say. Part of me thinks this is an extreme reaction, but another part, the part that saw what he did to you, that part understands. I just do not know what this means for us, for our future together." "That is something only you can decide," I told her gently. "But I would suggest you take some time to really consider whether the man you saw yesterday is someone you want to build a life with. People can change, can learn from their mistakes, but first they have to truly acknowledge them." After ending the call with Victoria, I sat quietly in my living room watching the clock. At 10 a.m., the moving company would arrive at Maxwell's condo. By noon, he would be effectively homeless, his property in storage, his investment gone. It was a harsh lesson, perhaps the harshest I had ever delivered as a father. But as I touched the still tender bruises on my face, I knew it was necessary. Maxwell would be at work now at the architectural firm where he had risen so quickly through the ranks. He would have no idea that his entire life was being dismantled in his absence. The notification would be delivered to him at his office at exactly noon, the same time the locks would be changed on what he still believed was his property. The clock ticked forward each minute, bringing us closer to the moment when Maxwell's carefully constructed world would collapse around him. I did not take pleasure in it. There was no satisfaction, no sense of revenge or righteous triumph. There was only sadness and a quiet, resolute certainty that this was the only language he might still understand. At exactly 11:55 a.m., my phone rang. Maxwell's name appeared on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, it rang again, and again. By noon, he had called 12 times in succession. Then the texts began flooding in frantic disbelieving, increasingly desperate. "Dad, what the hell is going on? I just got a notice saying my condo has been repossessed. This has to be a mistake. Call me immediately. There are movers at my place packing everything up. They will not listen to me. What have you done? Dad, answer your phone. This is not funny. They are saying the property was never fully mine, that there was a special clause. What are you talking about? My entire life is in that condo, all my belongings, my work files, everything. Is this because of what happened yesterday? This is insane. An extreme overreaction. Victoria just called me in tears. She says you told her everything. How could you involve her in this? My boss is asking what is going on. I had to leave work in the middle of a client meeting. Dad, please, this has gone far enough. Whatever point you are trying to make, I get it. Now call off these people. They changed the locks. I am standing outside my own home and cannot get in. Do you understand what you have done? I will sue you for this. I swear to God I will take you to court and take everything you have." The final text sent at 12:30 p.m. was simply, "Why?" In the 48 hours following the repossession of Maxwell's condo, an eerie silence descended. No calls, no texts, no unexpected visits. It was as if he had vanished completely, leaving only the echo of that final unanswered question, "Why?" I maintained my normal routine as best I could, though the lingering pain and visible bruising on my face made trips to the grocery store or hardware store uncomfortable. Neighbors noticed, of course, and I found myself manufacturing a story about a fall from a ladder while cleaning gutters. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but the truth seemed too private, too painful, to share casually. On the third day, a formal-looking envelope arrived by courier. Inside was a letter from a law firm representing Maxwell, threatening legal action for theft of property and malicious interference with financial interests. The letter demanded immediate restoration of Maxwell's ownership of the condo, plus financial compensation for emotional distress and damage to his professional reputation. I placed the letter in my home office without responding. Walter had already assured me that the legal ground was solid. Maxwell had signed the agreement containing the special provision, regardless of whether he had read it carefully. His documented assault on me had triggered that provision legally and conclusively. Later that same day, an unexpected visitor arrived. Victoria stood on my porch, looking tired and uncertain, her normally perfect appearance slightly disheveled, as if she had dressed in haste. "Mr. Brennan," she began, "I hope you do not mind me coming by unannounced. I needed to talk to someone who might understand." I invited her in, offered tea, which she accepted gratefully, and waited for her to gather her thoughts. "Maxwell and I are taking a break," she finally said, staring into her cup. "After what happened, after seeing what he did to you, and then watching his reaction to losing the condo, I just do not know who he is anymore. The man I thought I was going to marry would never have struck his father, would never have spoken to you the way he did. People sometimes show their true selves in moments of extreme stress or anger," I offered gently. "That is what scares me," she admitted. "If this is who he really is underneath the charming, successful architect I fell in love with, I do not think I can build a life with that person." "Have you told him this?" She nodded, blinking back tears. "Last night. He has been staying in a hotel since the condo situation. I went to see him thinking we could talk things through, find a way forward. But he was so angry, so focused on getting revenge against you, on fighting this legally. When I suggested that maybe he needed to accept responsibility for his actions, to use this as a wake-up call, she trailed off, wiping a tear that had escaped. "What happened?" I prompted softly. "He accused me of taking your side against him, said I was betraying him just like everyone else in his life, that I should be supporting him unconditionally if I truly loved him." She looked up, meeting my gaze directly. "But that is not love, is it? Real love includes holding someone accountable when they are wrong, helping them become better, not enabling their worst behaviors." "No, it is not." I agreed, thinking of Elaine and how she had always been my moral compass, gently but firmly guiding me back when I strayed from our shared values. Real love is much more complex than unconditional support. Victoria stayed for nearly an hour, talking through her confusion and heartbreak. I listened more than spoke, recognizing that she needed space to process her own thoughts, rather than advice from me. When she finally rose to leave, she hesitated at the door. "He does not know I came here. He would see it as another betrayal." "This stays between us," I assured her. "Mr. Brennan," she said, her voice steadying, "for what it is worth, I think what you did was right. Difficult, painful, but right. I hope someday Maxwell can see that too." After she left, I sat in the quiet house considering her words. Validation was not what I had sought in taking such drastic action against my son, but hearing that someone who loved him understood my motives provided a measure of comfort I had not expected. The next development came from an unexpected quarter. My phone rang the following morning with a number I did not recognize. The caller identified himself as Jonathan Pierce Maxwell's direct supervisor at the architectural firm. "Mr. Brennan, I hope you do not mind me contacting you. Maxwell listed you as his emergency contact when he was hired, and given the circumstances, I felt I should reach out." "What circumstances?" I asked, suddenly alert. "Maxwell has been exhibiting some concerning behaviors at work this week. He arrived late on Monday, left suddenly claiming a personal emergency, and then returned Tuesday in a highly agitated state. Yesterday, he had an outburst during a client meeting that was, well, frankly, it was unprofessional and out of character. Today, he called in saying he needs to take personal leave effective immediately." "I see," I said carefully, not wanting to reveal too much about our private family situation. "Mr. Brennan, I have known your son for nearly 10 years. He has always been ambitious, sometimes intensely so, but never unstable or volatile. Whatever is happening in his personal life is clearly affecting his professional judgment. As someone who values his contributions to our firm, I am concerned." I weighed my words carefully before responding. "My son is going through a difficult period of personal reckoning. I believe he needs to work through some fundamental issues regarding his values and behavior. It may take time." "I understand," Jonathan replied, though I doubted he truly could, without knowing the details. "We are prepared to provide him with the time off he needs, and our employee assistance program includes confidential counseling services if he chooses to utilize them. I just wanted to touch base with you to make sure there is someone looking out for his well-being during this time." After assuring Jonathan that the situation was being monitored, I ended the call with a renewed sense of concern. Maxwell's professional life had always been his pride, his identity. If his personal crisis was bleeding into that arena, the impact of losing the condo must have shaken him even more deeply than I had anticipated. Later that evening, I received my first direct communication from Maxwell since the repossession. It was not a call or a text, but an email with the subject line, "I need to understand." The body of the message was brief but markedly different in tone from his previous frantic texts. Dad, I have been trying to make sense of what happened, of what you did. At first I was just angry, convinced this was some disproportionate revenge for my inexcusable behavior at your house. But something Victoria said before she left keeps echoing in my mind. She asked if I had ever bothered to find out how I was able to purchase that condo at such a below-market price in the first place. I realized I had never questioned it, had simply attributed it to my own negotiating skills. Was that you? Have you been quietly supporting me all this time while I treated you the way I did? I think I need to know the whole story. When you are ready to tell it, I will listen. Maxwell. The coffee shop I had chosen was deliberately unremarkable, a locally owned establishment with mismatched furniture and walls lined with bookshelves. It was the kind of place that invited lingering conversations where the staff did not rush customers or raise eyebrows at emotional exchanges. I arrived 20 minutes early, selecting a corner table that offered some privacy while still being in a public enough space to discourage any potential repetition of Maxwell's violent outburst. He arrived precisely on time, pausing at the entrance to scan the room before spotting me. The change in his appearance was striking. Always meticulously groomed, Maxwell now looked disheveled. His normally perfect hair uncombed, his expensive shirt wrinkled as if he had slept in it. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and he had the slightly hunched posture of someone carrying an invisible weight. When he reached the table, he hesitated, clearly uncertain about the appropriate greeting. I gestured to the chair across from me, and he sat down without a word. For a long moment, we simply looked at each other, father and son separated by more than just a small wooden table. The bruises on my face, though fading, were still visible. Maxwell's gaze fixed on them briefly before dropping to his hands, which he had clasped tightly on the table surface. "Thank you for coming," I finally said, breaking the uncomfortable silence. "I almost did not." He admitted, his voice hoarse, as if he had not used it much recently. "Pride, I guess. Or fear. I am not sure which was stronger." A server approached, and we both ordered coffee, the mundane transaction providing a momentary reprieve from the tension. When she departed, Maxwell spoke again. "The lawyer says there is nothing I can do. The provision in the purchase agreement is legally binding. I signed it without reading it carefully. Classic mistake." He gave a humorless laugh. "An architect who did not examine the blueprints." "It was never meant to be activated," I said quietly. "It was a safeguard, something I hoped would never be necessary. But it became necessary." He stated not a question, but a recognition. "Because I hit you, repeatedly." The directness of his acknowledgement surprised me. "Yes. I have never—" He paused, swallowing hard. "I have never hit anyone before. Not since I was a child having a tantrum. I do not know what happened to me in that moment. It was like watching someone else using my body, doing things I would never do." "But you did do them, Maxwell." "Yes," he whispered. "I did. And there is no excuse. None whatsoever." Our coffee arrived, providing another brief interlude in the difficult conversation. Maxwell added cream to his cup with unsteady hands, spilling a few drops on the table. "Victoria left me," he said abruptly. "Returned the ring. Said she cannot marry someone capable of what I did to you." "I am sorry," I said, and meant it. Despite everything, I took no pleasure in my son's pain. "Are you—" He looked up sharply. "You destroyed my life in a single day. Took my home, humiliated me professionally, cost me my fiancée. Was that the plan, maximum damage?" "No," I replied steadily. "The plan was to create a consequence significant enough that you could not ignore it or rationalize it away, to force you to confront behaviors and attitudes that have been building for years. What behaviors, what attitudes? A flash of the old defensiveness returned to his voice. One terrible mistake, one moment of losing control, and you decided to burn everything to the ground. This was not about one moment, Maxwell. It was about years of growing disrespect, of treating your upbringing as something to be ashamed of viewing your mother and me as embarrassments, rather than as the people who sacrificed everything to give you opportunities. That is not fair, he protested. I have always been grateful for what you and Mom did. Have you? When was the last time you expressed that gratitude? When was the last time you spoke about your childhood without an undercurrent of disdain for its modesty? When was the last time you treated me as someone worthy of respect rather than as an outdated relic of a life you have outgrown? Maxwell opened his mouth as if to object, then closed it again, something like realization dawning in his eyes. For several moments he was silent, staring into his coffee cup, as if it might contain answers. You said in your email that you wanted to understand, I continued gently. The first thing you need to understand is that what happened at my house, your assault, was the culmination of a pattern, not an isolated incident. And the condo, he asked quietly. Was that really you all along? Did I never actually accomplish anything on my own? The reduced purchase price was arranged through my employers. Walter Gaines was the brother of the previous owner. He offered the discount as a gesture of appreciation for my 30 years with his company. But everything else you have accomplished professionally has been your own doing. Maxwell absorbed this information with a slight nod. All this time I thought I had negotiated some brilliant deal. I was so proud of myself for securing a property others were competing for. I even bragged about it to colleagues. You had no way of knowing. Because you never told me. A hint of accusation crept into his tone. Why keep it secret? Were you afraid I would reject your help? Partly, I acknowledged. But it was also about allowing you your pride, your sense of accomplishment. You were building your own life, and I did not want to intrude in ways that might make you feel dependent or obligated. So instead, you built in a secret trapdoor that would let you take it all away if I stepped out of line. The bitterness returned to his voice. I shook my head firmly. No, Maxwell. I included a provision that would only be activated in extreme circumstances. Circumstances I never imagined would actually arise. Physical violence against family members was one of those circumstances. Along with what else? Financial fraud, drug abuse. What other behaviors did you deem worthy of destroying my life over? This is not productive, I said, keeping my voice level. We are here to talk about what actually happened, not hypotheticals. Maxwell ran a hand through his disheveled hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his teenage self that it momentarily transported me back to simpler times. I just do not understand how we got here, he said, his voice cracking slightly. How did we go from being a normal family to this? 1 month after our coffee shop conversation, the landscape of our lives had shifted in ways both subtle and profound. Maxwell had found a small apartment, modest by his previous standards, but functional and within his means now that he was reassessing his priorities and spending habits. The legal threats had been withdrawn, replaced by weekly phone calls and occasional shared meals that remained somewhat awkward, but increasingly genuine. The most significant change came unexpectedly through Sophia. Always close to her brother, despite their different life paths, she had reached out to Maxwell after our coffee shop meeting, offering not just emotional support, but practical assistance as he rebuilt his life. Dad, she called me one evening, her voice tinged with cautious optimism. I think you should know that Max has started seeing someone. A therapist, I mean. Twice a week. That was not something I had suggested or required, I noted, surprised. I know. It was his idea entirely. He said he needs to understand why he became someone capable of hitting his own father, why he spent years being ashamed of the very people who gave him everything. She paused. He asked me if I ever felt that way, too embarrassed by our upbringing. And did you? I asked, genuinely curious. No, she replied without hesitation. Never. I was always proud of you and Mom, of how hard you worked, of the values you taught us. Maybe because I went to a state school, I was not surrounded by the kind of wealth and privilege Max encountered. Or maybe it is just a difference in our personalities. I do not know. The therapy was only the beginning. Maxwell began making other changes, small but meaningful adjustments, that suggested a genuine commitment to self-examination and growth. He volunteered at a community center teaching architectural concepts to underprivileged youth. He reconnected with old friends from before his Cornell days, people he had gradually dropped as he climbed the professional and social ladder. Most tellingly, he began speaking differently about his upbringing. No more dismissive references to our modest circumstances or apologetic explanations for his blue-collar origins. Instead, he started acknowledging the values inherent in how he was raised, the work ethic and integrity that had provided the foundation for his academic and professional success. Victoria remained out of the picture, their engagement permanently ended by mutual agreement after several difficult conversations. The loss clearly pained him, but he spoke of it with a surprising maturity, acknowledging that her decision was both understandable and probably necessary for both of them. She was falling in love with a version of me that was not entirely real, he explained during one of our dinners together. A carefully constructed image that could not be sustained. It is better that she found out before we married, before there were children involved. As for me, I was finding my own path forward as well. The drastic action I had taken in repossessing Maxwell's condo had been necessary but emotionally exhausting. It had forced me to confront difficult questions about my own role in how our relationship had deteriorated over the years. Had I been too accommodating of Maxwell's gradual distancing, too willing to accept his increasingly dismissive attitude to avoid conflict? Had I enabled the very behaviors I eventually felt compelled to address so dramatically? These questions led me to join a support group for parents of adult children, a place where I could share my experiences and learn from others facing similar challenges. The perspectives I gained there helped me understand that while Maxwell's behavior had been his responsibility, the dynamics between us had been co-created over many years. 6 weeks after our coffee shop meeting, Maxwell invited me to his new apartment for dinner, the first time he had extended such an invitation since the confrontation. The space was nothing like his former luxury condo, a simple one-bedroom in an older building with few amenities. But he had made it distinctly his own, with hand-drawn architectural sketches framed on the walls, bookshelves filled with volumes on design and construction, and a small drafting table set up in the corner of the living room. "It is not much," he said, as he showed me around, "but it is honest. No pretense, no statement about status or success. Just a place to live and work." He had prepared dinner himself, a simple pasta dish that reminded me of meals Elaine used to make when money was tight, but spirits were high. We ate at a small table by the window, looking out at an ordinary neighborhood street rather than the spectacular city view his condo had provided. "I have something to show you," he said, when we had finished eating. He retrieved a folder from his desk and handed it to me. Inside were preliminary drawings for a project labeled Community Center Expansion, Volunteer Design Services. "The center where I have been volunteering needs more space for their after-school programs," he explained. "They cannot afford to hire an architectural firm, so I offered to design the addition for free. It is not a prestigious project, will not win any awards or be featured in design magazines, but it will make a real difference to the kids who use the center. I studied the drawings, impressed not just by the technical skill which I had always known Maxwell possessed, but by the thoughtful attention to practical needs and constraints. This was architecture in service of community, not ego or acclaim. This is excellent work, Maxwell, truly meaningful. I thought you might appreciate it, he said with a small smile. It reminds me of all those times you took me to your construction sites when I was a kid. You always talked about buildings in terms of the people who would use them, not just as structures or monuments. I did not realize you remembered those conversations, I admitted. I remember more than you might think, he replied quietly. I just spent a long time trying to forget, trying to distance myself from those memories, because they did not fit the narrative I was creating about who I was and where I came from. The honesty in his statement struck me powerfully. This was not the defensive image-conscious son who had demanded I sell my home to fund his lifestyle. This was someone engaged in the difficult work of reconciling his past and present, of integrating the parts of himself he had tried to deny with the person he had become and still hoped to be. We continued our dinner conversation late into the evening, touching on topics both difficult and healing. Maxwell spoke about his therapy sessions, about confronting the shame he had inexplicably developed around his working-class origins, about recognizing how that shame had twisted into resentment and eventually erupted in violence. I am not asking for the condo back, he said, as I was preparing to leave. I understand why you did what you did. I needed that wake-up call, painful as it was. But I do have one request. What is that? I asked. The drafting table you and Mom gave me for graduation. It was put in storage with everything else. It would mean a lot to have it back to use it for these community projects. The request touched me deeply. Of all the expensive furnishings and status symbols that had filled his luxury condo, the one thing he wanted to reclaim was the gift Elaine and I had sacrificed to give him the tool meant to help him create rather than acquire. Of course, I said. I will make the arrangements tomorrow. As I drove home that night, I thought about the long, winding road that had brought us to this point. The journey from being a young family full of hope and simple pleasures through the growing distance of Maxwell's rise in a world so different from our own, to the violent rupture that had seemed to destroy any chance of reconciliation, and finally to this fragile new beginning. I had no illusions that everything was fixed. Maxwell had a long way to go in his personal journey, and our relationship would require continued work from both of us. Trust, once shattered, does not reassemble without visible seams. But for the first time in years, I felt we were both facing in the same direction, seeing each other with clearer eyes and more honest hearts. As parents, we raise our children hoping to give them better opportunities than we had to see them soar higher than we ever could. But sometimes in that process, we forget to teach them that the ground from which they launch remains sacred, that the hands that lifted them deserve respect, not despite their calluses, but because of them. Maxwell was learning that lesson now late, but perhaps not too late. And I was learning too about the courage it takes to enforce consequences, about the strength required to offer forgiveness without abandoning boundaries, about the complex, imperfect, enduring nature of family love. Have you ever had to take drastic action to teach someone an important life lesson? Comment below and share your experience. And if this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that even the most broken relationships can find a path toward healing. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember that sometimes the hardest consequences can lead to the most necessary growth.